married when they were both 20 years old, during their final year of college. They were bright, friendly, and good-looking. Jim stood about 5'10" and weighed 170 pounds, with sandy brown hair and a youthful face. Mary was quite beautiful, 5'8" and slim, with dark brown hair and sparkling eyes. Before they met, they both had previous relationships. Mary had been dating a basketball player while Jim was single. They met at a charity event, and they felt an instant attraction. Jim asked Mary out right away. She accepted, but mentioned she was in a relationship. Despite this, Jim took her to dinner and a movie. When he dropped her off at her apartment, they shared a kiss, which happened to be seen by her boyfriend, who was out with someone else. The next day, Mary's boyfriend confronted her, and she told him she liked Jim and thought they should take a break. He was upset and walked away. Jim called Mary and asked her out again, and she said yes. Later, they went to a dance where Mary and Jim arrived late. Her ex-boyfriend, Freddie, approached them and started trouble by pushing Jim. Although Jim was smaller than Freddie, he had been learning self-defense since he was young. He laughed at Freddie, which only made him angrier. Freddie tried to hit Jim, but Jim quickly defended himself and handled the situation. Then, Jim helped Freddie up, and they both calmed down. Mary decided she was done with Freddie, while Jim was now in a serious relationship. After graduation, Jim started working in finance and supported Mary while she went to law school. Their first child, Peter, was born as she graduated early. They welcomed 2 more children, Ellen and Grace, shortly after. Mary worked part-time at a local law firm, but mostly stayed home with the kids. Jim did very well at his job in finance, and they raised their family in an upscale neighborhood near Washington, D.C. Over the years, Mary grew more settled in her life and work. When Grace went to college, Mary began working full-time at her firm and became a partner, showing great skill in handling complex cases. After more than 24 years of marriage, a new hire joined Mary's division at the firm. His name was Josh Logan. He was tall, strong, and very attractive, with curly blonde hair and blue eyes. All the women at the firm, including Mary, noticed him. Josh was friendly and flirty with the women, and while many flirted back, Mary didn't. She found him appealing, but stayed committed to her husband and family. Josh tried to catch Mary's interest, but she remained focused on her work and her life with Jim. He always complimented her on how great she looked and how smart she was. She would smile and say thank you, but not much else. It was Valentine's Day, and her company organized a dinner and dance at a local venue. Jim and Mary were expected to go, and they did. At this time in their marriage, Mary was still very attractive. She stayed fit by going to the gym every weekday, and she dressed nicely. Fashionable, but not too revealing. Jim, on the other hand, had put on some weight and was not very active. The most exercise he got was walking to and from his office, which was 2 miles each way. That kept him in decent shape, but he weighed 225 pounds and looked rather heavy. At the Valentine's Day dance, Mary introduced Jim around, although most people already knew him. Josh didn't, and they shook hands when Mary made the introduction. After dinner, Mary and Jim danced a few songs and then sat down at their table. Mary had a couple of glasses of wine and felt a little tipsy when Josh asked her to dance. She felt a flutter of excitement and agreed. Jim didn't seem bothered by it. The two danced a lively jitterbug. Mary danced well, and so did Josh. They danced closely during a fast-paced song, moving in rhythm together. It was innocent fun, but still a bit flirtatious. Others at the firm started to notice this, including Jim. Mary was just enjoying herself and found herself drawn to Josh. When a slow song came on, they moved closer to each other, which made Jim feel uneasy. He knew Mary worked closely with Josh and could sense the spark between them. It was clear for everyone to see, and it frustrated Jim even more. When the slow song ended, the band took a break. Josh walked Mary back to their table and thanked her for the dances. Jim shot him a blank stare. Josh smiled at Jim before walking away. Mary noticed the tension between Jim and Josh, even with the effects of the wine. "Jim, I might have gotten a bit carried away, I'm sorry. Josh is a good dancer," Mary said. Jim replied, "I noticed. I think everyone here did. It seemed like you two were enjoying each other quite a bit." "I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just having fun. Let's say our goodbyes and talk about it later, just the two of us." So they made their rounds, saying brief goodbyes to the other partners. When they passed by Josh, who was sitting with some young co-workers, Mary waved, but Jim just stared. On the way home, neither of them said much. Jim couldn't shake off the worry that Mary might be developing feelings for Josh. It was the first time in their 24 years together that he thought about this. Even if Mary wasn't involved with Josh now, they worked together closely, and it was clear there was mutual attraction. What if something happened between them? As they prepared for bed, the weight of the evening hung in the air. Mary walked in wearing a light nightgown. Jim felt attracted to her. He pulled her close, and she could feel his excitement. It was something she had missed lately. As he leaned in, she briefly thought about Josh, but then Jim pulled her nightgown over her head and took off his shorts. He was very excited. She reached out and touched him gently, feeling a spark that had been missing. Mary wanted to make sure he didn't finish too soon, so she gently guided him to lie down. She lowered herself onto him with a passion she hadn't felt in a long time. As they shared this moment, she found herself thinking about Josh again. Jim was filled with desire for his wife, but Mary couldn't shake her feelings for Josh. In that moment, something wonderful happened, and they both felt a deep connection they hadn't experienced in years. Afterward, they got up to clean up a bit. Back in bed, Mary snuggled close to Jim. "I love you. That was amazing. We should do that more often," she said. "Definitely. But what is it?" "Nothing," Jim replied. "Thanks for bringing excitement back into my life." Mary fell asleep, but Jim stayed awake. He couldn't stop thinking about how much Mary seemed to enjoy her time with Josh. He imagined them dancing together and wondered if they clicked better than he and Mary did. He knew he needed to make some changes for himself. The next morning, Jim woke up early, tied his sneakers, and went for a run. He ran until he was tired, switching between running and walking. When he returned home, Mary had made pancakes for breakfast. He ate one and then stopped. Mary noticed that Jim seemed to be starting a fitness plan, and she knew why. "Jim, you know that I love you. I might have danced too much with Josh last night, but I would never want anyone else but you," she said. "I had a great time last night, but I can't help wondering if dancing with Josh made you feel that way," he replied. Mary nodded. "I can't deny that those dances made me excited. But you were the one I was with. Are you spending time with him in other ways?" "Of course not. How could you think that?" "I saw the way you danced. It looked like you wanted to be closer to him. Were you thinking of him last night?" Mary paused, and Jim could see her hesitation. "I'm not blaming you, Mary. I just think many women might choose him over me," Jim said. "But that's not me. I always choose you. You know what I'm saying, Mary, and we both know it's true. You feel a strong attraction to him, and it's clear to everyone around you. You have to work with Josh every day. You know he's going to approach you now. What will you do? How long will it take before you give in to him? I understand your point. I need to think about this because even though I won't give in, people at work will talk," she said. "I'm going to get back into shape. Please don't let that guy get to you," he urged. "The only one who'll get to me is you," she smiled. Jim went to the basement and set up his old weight bench and a stationary bike. He exercised for an hour and signed up at a gym to practice his self-defense. That night, they shared a passionate evening. On Sunday, they went to church, and afterward, Jim watched basketball while Mary worked on a case. During dinner, which Jim made, Mary brought up the issue with Josh. "I've thought about how to handle Josh at work. I've decided we need to have a conversation on Monday morning. I'll tell him that Friday was a mistake and that he needs to stop flirting with me. I can't just ignore him. We're both working on a big case together," Mary explained. "I'm not comfortable with that. I think he'll keep bothering you until you give in." "Maybe I should talk to him instead," Jim growled. "No, Jim, what would you say?" "I'll tell him that there can be no more flirting or suggestive comments," she insisted. "Sure, that'll scare him off," he replied. "I'm actually pretty good at making people back off," Mary said confidently. "You're scaring me a little now," he admitted. "I promise nothing will happen." "Okay, but I want updates from you every day and no excuses," he said. "Deal," she agreed. That night, they shared a deep connection, but Mary found herself thinking about Josh more than she liked. This worried her. Even with her strong front in front of Jim, she felt unsure about resisting Josh, but she was determined to stay true to her commitment. The next morning, Mary walked into work and asked her assistant to get Josh for a meeting right away. Only a few minutes passed before he arrived at her office. "Sit down, Josh. We need to talk about Friday night. It was a mistake. My marriage is not in a great place, and Jim was really upset. He felt embarrassed by what happened," she began. "I'm sorry if he feels uncomfortable," Josh said nonchalantly. "I wasn't thinking about him. I wanted to focus on you. I've been interested in you since I started here. You must have noticed that. I'm married and love my husband. I'm not looking to pursue anything with you. While we're working, you can't flirt with me anymore in public or private," she stated firmly. "If you do anything that could hurt the firm or anyone involved, I'll end our work on the Angel case. You'll have to handle other types of cases from now on." "Please don't do that. I promise I'll be good, but I have one small request," he said with a grin. "What is it?" "You're not really in a position to ask for things. I want a kiss every Friday, just one. If I misbehave, I won't get it." "You're crazy," she shouted a little. "I'm not crazy. I plan to win your heart away from your husband if I can. I have no problem admitting that. You're the most amazing woman I've ever met. You're just afraid of kissing me, worried that you might start to feel the same way." "I am not afraid," she insisted, sounding almost like a child. "So is it a deal?" "Okay, it's a deal." Josh got up and left the room, feeling pleased with how the meeting went. Mary, however, realized she might have been tricked. She was supposed to report to Jim daily about what was happening with Josh, but there was no way she could tell him about the promised kiss. She felt guilty, but also a rush of excitement that she found hard to resist. That morning, Mary was called into the office of the managing partner, Harry Weiss. "Please sit down, Mary. Would you like some coffee?" Harry asked. "No, thank you. What's going on?" "I need to talk about your relationship with Josh. I'm quite worried about what I've seen and where it may lead. Maybe you should be separated." Mary looked down and said, "I can't deny there's some attraction between us, but I'm determined to keep it under control. We're adults, not kids. I told Josh this morning that there can't be any more flirting. He understood. We really need to focus on the Angel case now, which is nearing an important conclusion." Harry replied, "Is it really necessary? Is it a problem for you two to continue working together after the Angel project? That could create issues." "I want to say it isn't a problem, but I can't." "Okay, we'll think it over. I expect to speak to Josh later today, and I'll give him a warning. He's not a partner here, but you are. I believe he's more responsible for this situation than you. How he responds in the coming weeks will be important for his future here." Mary left the meeting feeling somewhat reassured, but maybe it was a bit too hopeful. After lunch, Josh entered Harry's office. Josh was nervous. "Hello, Mr. Weiss." "Hi, Josh. I think you know why you're here. Is it about Mary?" "Yes, I need to ask you to stop trying to charm her. You might say that's not what you're doing, but we were aware of your tendency to get too close with attractive married women when we hired you. That's actually why we paired you with Mary, hoping she could keep things professional. Clearly, we were mistaken. Her husband is a friend of mine, and he was very embarrassed last Friday." "Not good," Josh replied. "Mr. Weiss, I was really drawn to Mary. It had been building up, and on Friday I decided to ask her to dance to see if she really was as distant as she seemed since I arrived. As you saw, she wasn't. I got a bit carried away, and I didn't mean to embarrass anyone or make her husband uncomfortable." "Josh, you've done a great job with Angel, and you'll keep working on Mary's case. But once it's done, maybe consider a small change in your role. If that doesn't work for you, it might be time to look for something else." "I understand. Thanks for letting me know. I promise I won't try to pursue Mary at all. I can do that even if it's not easy." "All right. You and Mary will be kept an eye on. Now get back to work." Josh and Mary didn't see each other for the rest of the day. But as Mary was leaving work around 6 p.m., she ran into Josh coming back from a meeting. They stepped aside for a moment. Josh said, "I had a talk with Mr. Weiss. I'm in a bit of trouble. It's kind of like being on probation." "I had a meeting too. Not as serious, maybe. I guess our plan is off the table." "No, we made a deal and I intend to keep it." Josh smiled at her, but Mary felt flustered. She turned and walked away without saying anything more. That night, Josh had a date with a young woman he met at a club. They went out to dinner and then returned to his place where they enjoyed themselves. But while he was with her, thoughts of Mary kept creeping into his mind. He was worried because he had never felt so captivated by someone before. He tried to distract himself, but nothing worked. although his date was happy. Meanwhile, Mary went home to find that Jim had cooked a lovely dinner. Fish and vegetables with a glass of white wine. She noticed that Jim looked better, maybe a little slimmer. Mary said, "I wonder what inspired you to start cooking. I'm not complaining, though." "You know why. I'm trying to make our marriage better. Just putting in a little effort," Jim replied. "Jim, you don't need to worry. But if I keep getting good meals, well, you might have less to worry about." They both laughed, but Jim felt a bit uneasy, while Mary felt more in control, and she liked that. "What happened at work?" Jim asked. "I talked to Josh and made it clear he needed to stop any pursuit of me." He agreed. "Then Harry called me in and I assured him I wouldn't let any problems come from Josh. Later, I think he had a talk with Josh and basically warned him, so I hope it's settled now." Jim seemed unsure. "Okay, I still feel uneasy knowing you and Josh are drawn to each other. Maybe it's just that you're so attracted to him. I feel vulnerable." "You're not vulnerable at all. Since the dance, our time together has really improved. But that's because you're thinking about him. What does that matter? You're getting all the attention, and he's not getting any. Maybe that's true if you were daydreaming about a movie star, but Josh is right there with you every day. I feel uneasy about you. I can't help it, and I won't pretend otherwise. We'll just have to deal with this. In a couple of months, this case will be over, and Harry says he'll keep us apart. Well, just as long as Josh doesn't get too close. He won't. He has a job to consider. And Mary, I don't mean to be harsh, but your marriage is at stake too. I wouldn't be okay with you being unfaithful, especially with all these warnings showing up." "Okay, I understand." Mary was surprised by Jim's words. She wondered if he really meant it. Would he truly end their marriage if he found out she had feelings for Josh? The thought worried her. She knew she was at risk of falling for him. If Josh kept trying, she feared she might give in. After their brief talk, she thought he probably would keep trying. He wouldn't back out of the deal. On Friday, if he acted nicely, she owed him a kiss. That night, as Jim and Mary went to bed, she was still thinking about the upcoming kiss. Her mind wandered further. She caught herself wondering about Josh in a way she shouldn't. She turned to Jim and expressed her feelings. He welcomed her affection, knowing exactly what was on her mind, and she knew he could tell. It didn't seem to bother her much, though. She found herself feeling excited, and Jim was there for her. Each time she felt happy, she imagined it was Josh's presence. Jim was aware of her thoughts, which bothered him a little, but not enough to turn her away. The next day at work, Jim thought hard about his situation. He decided he couldn't trust Mary not to fall for Josh. He felt this needed more attention. He went to see a private investigator. Mick James listened to Jim's concerns. He thought about how to keep an eye on Mary at the law firm. He believed if anything happened between her and Josh, it would be at some private spot at work. Maybe they would take a long lunch and she'd say she had to work late. But then again, maybe she wouldn't. He provided Jim with a phone app to check Mary's phone and a program for her home computer. He suggested putting a GPS on her car and Josh's car. He even had a small recording device to slip into her purse. But he cautioned Jim that despite all this, they might still miss something critical. Mary's week went by quietly. Josh was always respectful. Their exchanges were formal and lacked emotion, very businesslike. People in the office noticed something different about Mary and Josh. Before the dance, they had been friendly, although Mary seemed a bit formal, but now they were acting stiff and distant, which led to some gossip. Mick's agent, pretending to be a delivery person, caught wind of some of the rumors. However, throughout the week, nothing happened that was inappropriate or troubling. On Friday, Mary felt nervous. She thought a lot about how to handle the situation with the kiss. She thought about just canceling it altogether, and maybe that would have been best, but she felt determined to go through with it. At 5:30 p.m., when most of the staff had left for the weekend, Josh knocked softly on her office door. He walked in with a self-satisfied look. "I kept my promise. Now I want my reward," he said. "Okay," she replied, standing firmly behind her desk. Josh stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. Mary looked up at him, feeling shaky and excited inside. He leaned down to kiss her, and she felt a rush. She wasn't sure how to respond as they shared the kiss. It felt overwhelming. Her emotions took over, and she gasped slightly. After the kiss, Josh stepped back, and Mary felt a mix of confusion and surprise. "See you next Friday," he said with a grin as he walked out. Mary was left in shock. She realized that if Josh returned next week, things would be very different. She felt a thrill and a bit of fear at the same time. Trying to calm herself, she changed into a different blouse from her closet, one that looked just like the one she had worn earlier. Then she headed home, working to gather her thoughts. Unknown to Mary, the kiss was recorded by a device in her purse. Jim, her husband, wouldn't see that recording until later that night, as the device sent information to his computer at a scheduled time. When Mary got home, Jim had made dinner again, rice and chicken with vegetables. She thought about how she had an unusual arrangement. She could enjoy her time at work and still come home to a nice meal prepared by her caring husband. Instead of guilt, she felt a strange sense of empowerment. "How was work?" Jim asked. "Great, we're making good progress on the case," she replied. "What about with Josh?" he probed. "No change. I think everything will be all right," she answered, dodging the topic. Later that night, Mary thought about whether she should tell Jim about her interactions with Josh, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Once again, she found herself being affectionate with her husband. On Saturday, Jim took her out for dinner and dancing. They had a wonderful time together, and Jim, although not the lightest on his feet, was a surprisingly good dancer. When they got home, they hurried to bed and shared a passionate moment. On Sunday morning, Mary woke Jim up with a gentle touch. He flipped her over and returned the kind gesture. Afterward, they took a refreshing shower and enjoyed a nice breakfast together. But Jim was feeling uneasy. He thought Mary's strong energy might mean something troubling was happening at her job, despite her reassurances. He remembered the recorder he had left in her purse. Once he finished working outside, he showered again. While Mary was visiting her friend Gail next door, he listened to the recording. He skipped through most of her day, stopping occasionally to check for anything important. When he reached the end of the day, he let it play. He heard Josh enter Mary's office and close the door, saying he was there for a reward. Jim's heart sank. Soon after, he heard Mary's voice, and it upset him deeply. Jim felt shocked and angry. He tried to understand what he had just heard. He didn't believe anything too serious had happened, but it was clear that something inappropriate had taken place. Meanwhile, Mary was talking with Gail. Gail noticed Mary seemed distracted and asked her about it. Feeling the need for another opinion, Mary shared a brief version of her situation. Gail was alarmed, as she thought Mary would never betray Jim. "How could you do that?" Gail asked. "He's clearly interested in more than just friendship." "I know," Mary replied. "But I can't help thinking about it since I saw him. It's tempting. What should I do?" "Don't go down that path. If Jim finds out, it'll be a disaster. If it was just after work, no one would know. I just need it once. Mary, if you do this and it feels good, it might lead to more, and then what? Jim said he would leave me." Tears of frustration filled Mary's eyes. "You need to end this," Gail insisted. "If you wait until next week, it could get out of hand. I'll tell him I've changed my mind." "You might need to take stronger action. Think about it." Mary left to walk home. Jim had calmed down and reflected on everything. He didn't want to end his marriage and wouldn't let himself be pushed aside. So, even though it meant revealing his secret, he knew he had to let Mary know how close they were to a serious problem. He brought his laptop downstairs just as Mary returned from Gail's place. She realized that thinking about her moment with Josh excited her. As she walked into her house, images of him filled her mind. Jim was sitting on the couch in comfortable shorts and a t-shirt. Mary wore a sundress. When she saw him, she playfully tossed her underwear aside and knelt before him, feeling bold and impulsive. There was a spark between them, and their connection deepened. As they kissed, Mary's thoughts wandered back to Josh. She felt a mix of emotions, including a powerful sense of control over Jim. This new dynamic surprised her and made her heart race. It was as if she was stepping into a world of her own making. Jim was caught off guard but didn't resist Mary. The intensity of the moment left him speechless. After they shared an intimate moment, they rested together in silence for a while. Eventually, Mary looked at Jim and said, "You are mine, and I'm calling the shots." "Okay," Jim replied softly. Mary continued, "I couldn't stop thinking about Josh while we were together." Jim felt uneasy at her words. But before he could respond, Mary added, "I love how I can take charge like this." Jim felt something stir within him as Mary spoke with confidence. "Who do you belong to?" she asked playfully. "I'm yours, Mary." "But what if I want Josh instead?" she teased. "Please don't," he said, a hint of desperation in his voice. Mary smiled mischievously and rose from their embrace, leaving Jim feeling both stunned and intrigued. She walked away with a playful confidence that left him wondering how the tables had turned in their relationship. Jim couldn't shake off his conflicting feelings. He thought about how Mary spoke about Josh and what that meant for them. He had never expected this shift in their dynamic, leaving him feeling a bit lost and uncertain. Mary had been very clear that she wanted to be with Josh. Jim didn't think he could change her mind now. It was all up to her, and he might have made a mistake by asking her not to see him. What would happen if she did it anyway and didn't even try to hide it from him? The thought of Josh winning by getting closer to his wife filled him with anger. But at the same time, the idea of Mary being in control of the situation was strangely exciting for him. He felt lost about what to do. While Mary was in the shower, she considered everything that had happened. She had taken charge of the situation, and her husband had pleaded with her not to be with Josh. He hadn't demanded it. He had begged her. That thought made her feel thrilled. When she got out of the shower, she put on a pretty sundress and went downstairs barefoot. Jim was wearing shorts, but nothing else. She smiled at him and motioned for him to join her in the kitchen. They exchanged looks, full of tension. Jim asked, "Are you going to go through with it?" "I think I will. It's my choice, so please stop pleading." "We might never be the same." "Will we ever be the same now?" Jim looked down, unsure of how to respond. Jim continued, "What happened on Friday? I know something did. I agreed to let him have a kiss if he behaved all week. He came in, kissed me, and got very close until I felt overwhelmed. After that, he left, and I took care of myself, then came home, and we were very close together." "What will happen next Friday?" "I don't know, but things have changed for both of us, and our relationship has been different." Jim replied, "I'm not sure I can stay if you go on with this. No matter how much I care about you, my pride is at stake. It already hurts to think I'm not your first choice. I like how things are right now. I feel strong. Maybe I'll keep him interested for a while and then come home and be with you." "That sounds risky." "Maybe. We'll have to see. By the way, is something going on with you?" Before they knew it, they drifted back into intimacy. It was gentle and lasted a long time. Afterward, they made dinner and cuddled on the couch until bedtime. The next day, Jim went to work and decided to call his friend Harry. They'd been friends for a while, spending time together on the golf course and having drinks afterward. Jim decided to call Harry's private phone. When Harry answered, he said, "Jim, how are you? I hope everything is okay." "It's not. Mary has feelings for that guy, Josh. I warned her on Monday and I watched them all week. Nothing strange happened." "That's not true." On Friday, Josh visited Mary's office after hours, and they shared a moment that went further than intended. "How do you know this?" someone asked. "She told me. She seemed different all weekend, and I guessed something had happened. She explained that there was an agreement. Josh would give her space all week, but he got a kiss on Friday for being good, and it led to more. I need to do something about this. I specifically told them to stop. Please don't tell them I called you. If Mary thinks I'm the reason, she'll be really upset. I'll say they were seen and overheard. Thanks. Just keep me updated on what happens." "Sure," Harry replied. Before hanging up, Jim felt bad for revealing Mary's actions, but he didn't want to be seen as weak. He was troubled by his feelings. He liked their moments together, even when she showed interest in Josh. He knew it excited her, and he tried to push those feelings aside. Still, he could not imagine keeping his marriage if his wife was with someone else, secretly or openly. That's how he felt at that time. After lunch, Mary and Josh were called into Harry's office. Both seemed tense. "Please sit down," Harry said, his tone serious. "You were heard Friday afternoon." He looked at each of them. Mary turned pale while Josh looked down. "I'm really sorry, Harry. I know things have gone too far," Mary said. "That's putting it mildly." "It's my fault," Josh spoke up. "I fell for Mary. I've never felt this way before." I'd resign if you asked, but I can't just stop my feelings. I don't feel that way about you, Josh. I love my husband. I only have attraction for you. I need you to leave me alone, please. Josh, your resignation is accepted. But if you continue to pursue Mary, I'll make sure you don't work here again. Be sensible and we can provide good references. Your work has been solid. I'll pack my things and leave. Mr. Herring from security will accompany you. He's waiting outside. They all watched Josh exit without a word. Mary quietly shed tears. I can't believe you let this happen, Mary, Harry said. I don't know how it got so far. I was drawn to him after those dances, maybe even before. Do you think he'll just let this go? I need to know if he won't, Harry asked. I'm unsure of what he'll do. He says he loves me. He might try to pursue me despite your warnings. What will you do? If you spend more time with him, Jim will find out. I know. Not to change the subject, but what about the Angel case? I've assigned 2 young associates to help you with it. They're both reading the file now. By the way, they're women. Mary gazed out of her window as Josh was escorted to his car. She felt sad for him, mixed with frustration and disappointment. She had thought she could manage her feelings for Josh, but now everything felt different. Mary returned home on time where Jim was waiting for her. On her way, she thought about how to explain the day's events. In the end, she chose to just be straightforward. Hi, she said, walking inside. It was an interesting day. Josh got fired because of what happened on Friday. Someone must have overheard us. Well, I can't say I'm sorry to hear that. How are you feeling about it? I'm not sure. A bit conflicted. Part of me felt excited by the attention from Josh, but maybe it's for the best. I don't want to lose you, Jim. I love you. Did you make dinner? Yeah, I made salmon and vegetable soup with some homemade bread. Wow, I like this new you. You've been cooking a lot and you seem healthier. They sat down for dinner, and as they ate, Mary told Jim about her meeting with Harry. The food was delicious, and afterward Jim cleaned up. Mary watched him while sipping her wine. She noticed how much he had been taking care of things lately, and it made her think. She changed into a comfortable pair of shorts and a t-shirt. Pulling Jim into the living room, she sat down on the couch. As he started to sit beside her, she stopped him. I could use a foot rub, she said casually. Sure, Jim agreed. He sat down at her feet and began massaging them, one after the other. He seemed lost in thought as he worked, his eyes focused on the floor. Mary noticed the calmness in his demeanor, which made her reflect on their relationship. You enjoy taking care of me, don't you? She asked softly. Yes, I do, he replied. And I like it too, she added, smiling. Jim continued to rub her feet, and Mary felt a sense of closeness between them. She knew she needed to be mindful of their relationship, but she also felt comfortable exploring this dynamic. After a while, they both got ready for bed, leaving the complexities of the day behind. I'm going to take control again. Jim followed her upstairs. The next day, Mary was at work and thought about Josh. She missed him. However, she and her 2 new female assistants made good progress on the Angel case. As the day went on, Mary considered her situation with Jim and Josh. She was curious about Jim's willingness to let her have Josh because he felt submissive. Was he being honest? She decided she needed to find out. Mary picked up the phone and called Josh. Hi, Josh. Mary, should you be calling me from work? Josh, I've thought a lot about you and how you feel about me. I need you to know that I don't love you. However, I do feel a strong attraction toward you, unlike any I've felt before. I would like to see you, but I don't want to lose Jim. He doesn't have to know, but he would know. He's very observant. So I plan to talk to him first. I'd like to go dancing with you on Friday night and then come home Saturday morning, but I want this to be a one-time thing. I'll be glad to take you out, and if it happens, I doubt it will be just once. I need you to believe that. Should I pick you up or should we meet somewhere? Pick me up at 700. She hung up. Mary was excited by what she had planned. In 3 days, she would spend time with Josh. That day, Jim worked from home. He resolved to take a more active role with Mary that night. No more yielding. He believed if things continued this way, Mary might end up with Josh. He thought he had been mistaken when he told her that he could stay with her after that, as he realized it might not be true. Maybe he felt differently in the moment, but he worried about what would happen the next day. He reminded himself of that. Despite this, He knew that if Mary chose Josh, it would be very hard for him. He couldn't see himself leaving her. He also couldn't deny that when she took charge, it stirred feelings in him he hadn't felt before. When he asked her not to be with Josh, he felt a rush of emotions. He realized he had an eager side, and the thought of Mary with someone else intrigued him. When Mary walked in, she noticed the familiar and pleasant smell of dinner. "Hi, we have some stew cooking. We have time," he said. "Let's head upstairs and you can help me get ready." Jim followed her up the stairs to the bedroom. She took off her dress and he saw that she was simply dressed beneath. She turned to look at him, noticing he was looking better. Jim moved closer to her, wanting to be close. Mary felt excited and ready for Jim. "Jim, you're looking great already," he said. He picked her up and held her close. He made her feel cherished. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling secure. Jim held her firmly, surprising Mary with his strength. She never knew he could be like this, and it both amazed and thrilled her. After a tender moment, Jim set her gently on the bed. She smiled at him, still a bit breathless. Jim returned her smile, his eyes bright with mischief. "No more Mr. Nice Guy," he teased. "Okay," she replied softly, feeling a mix of surprise and excitement. They showered together and enjoyed a cozy dinner of stew. Mary decided to wait and not tell Jim about her upcoming date on Friday. She wasn't even sure if she wanted it anymore. After dinner, they went to bed, where Jim showed her his love again. It felt new and thrilling, and she realized just how much she loved him. She told him so. On Wednesday morning, they both left for work smiling. Mary felt unsure about her date with Josh. Jim's newfound confidence had taken her by surprise. But the thought of Josh, who was younger and had caught her attention, lingered in her mind. As the day went on, she focused on her work and tried not to think about it. When it was time to go home, she wondered what the evening would bring. Each evening lately felt like a new adventure. Jim worked hard that day, too. While cooking dinner when he got home, a veggie and egg salad with scalloped potatoes, his thoughts drifted to his relationship with Mary. He enjoyed cooking for her. It made him feel connected, and he liked the idea of caring for her. He was also pleased to see the positive changes in himself as he focused on healthy eating. When Mary texted to say she was on her way home, Jim decided to surprise her. He took off his clothes and put on her frilly apron from the cupboard. He felt playful as he chopped the vegetables. When Mary walked in, she called out, "In here!" "Jim, what are you doing?" she asked, surprised. "Cooking your dinner, of course," he replied with a grin, happy to see her reaction. Mary felt a strong sense of control over Jim, and his actions seemed to confirm it. "Crawl over and take off my sandals," she said. Jim, feeling eager, obeyed. He crawled to her and carefully removed her sandals. "If you ask nicely, I might let you kiss my feet," she added. "May I please kiss your feet, Mary?" he asked politely. "Sure. You're such an obedient husband. I'm glad you're mine." "Yes, I am too," Jim replied, placing soft kisses on her feet. "That's enough for now," she said. "Go finish cooking." "Yes, Mary," Jim replied as he headed to the kitchen. Jim had been reflecting on his emotions when he had been more assertive with Mary earlier. He realized that he had been imagining someone else in his place, which stirred something deep inside him. This realization left him feeling uncertain, but he still found himself quietly returning to his submissive role, preparing dinner. Mary sipped her wine while Jim cooked. As they ate together, she decided to talk about the change she had noticed in him. "Why have you gone back to being so submissive?" she asked. "I'm not entirely sure," Jim replied, avoiding the full truth. "I just felt something stir in me while I was cooking. It makes me feel different, like I'm meant to serve you." His words surprised her, and she felt a spark of excitement. The dynamic between them seemed to be shifting. "Is that so?" she replied. "On your knees." Without hesitation, Jim knelt down and Mary looked at him deep in thought. She knew they needed to discuss things further, but decided to take it slowly. After dinner, Mary motioned for Jim to follow her into the living room. He obeyed, kneeling before her, awaiting her next words. "Jim, I need to talk to you about something. I've made plans with Josh for Friday. We're going to dinner, and after that I'll be spending the night at his place." Jim's face showed a mixture of emotions, but he spoke clearly. "I don't want you to do this. Things between us have been better, but if you go through with this, I can't stay with you." Mary observed him, still kneeling, clearly conflicted but also calm. "I don't believe you, Jim," she said gently. "I think deep down you've accepted this." Jim looked at the ground, trying to process everything, but Mary continued, softening her tone. "I love you, and I always will. This is something I need to figure out, but I won't always expect you to be in this position." On Friday night, Mary told Jim that she would be spending time with Josh, and there was nothing he could do about it. "You won't leave me, will you?" she asked. "No," Jim replied. Mary noticed Jim's reaction. "It must be tough for you, knowing I'm with someone else." "Yes," Jim admitted, feeling a mix of embarrassment and something else he couldn't quite shake off. "I'm glad we have everything clear now. Can you help me feel good?" she requested. Jim complied, caring for her and ensuring she felt satisfied. After a while, Mary took her turn to be with him. She felt confident and in control during their time together. Afterward, she told him, "Come upstairs when you're ready." "Okay, Mary." As Jim cleaned the kitchen, he felt tears come to his eyes. Even though he was physically strong, he felt weak emotionally. The thought of Mary and Josh occupied his mind, stirring feelings of frustration and sadness. Meanwhile, after her shower, Mary contemplated her marriage and what she truly wanted. She enjoyed having freedom and hoped for a different kind of relationship. She realized pushing Jim too hard might not be the best approach, even if it seemed to excite him. Once Jim finished his chores, he went upstairs. Mary welcomed him into the bathroom. "You should shower, Jim," she suggested. He followed her advice. Mary had seen the tears on Jim's face despite his efforts to hide them. She laid on their bed, relaxed and waiting for him. When Jim emerged from the shower, Mary looked at him and said, "I like this side of you, Jim. You're doing great. Now come here." He approached her. Their time together was intense but brief. Mary expressed her feelings, imagining another person's name. Afterward, they lay quietly together. Jim broke the silence, saying, "Mary, people will talk about me. It could hurt my work." Mary listened. "You're worried about being seen with Josh?" "Yes, it feels risky. Where are you two going on your outing?" "I'm not sure yet," Mary replied. "I'll ask him tomorrow." They fell asleep, comforted by each other's presence. The next day, Mary reached out to Josh for details about their date. "I made reservations for dinner and dancing at Maddie's," he informed her. Mary recalled that many of her friends frequented Maddie's. "Josh, that could be awkward for Jim. Can we choose a quieter place?" "What do you have in mind?" he asked. "I could cook dinner at your place, or we could skip the meal entirely." "As for dancing, we'll keep it simple," she joked. "Sounds good," Jim replied. "I promise you'll have a great time." Mary laughed. That evening, Mary explained her plans to Jim, and he was relieved that he wouldn't be openly embarrassed. Things between them were going smoothly until Thursday. Jim had prepared sausages and salad for dinner. He had gotten into the habit of cooking without clothes, as Mary seemed to prefer that over wearing an apron. Mary set only one place at the table. "Tonight you'll serve me like a house assistant," she instructed. "Yes, Mary," Jim replied. "And you'll sleep at the foot of the bed. No intimacy tonight. I want to be rested and ready for my time with Josh tomorrow." "Yes, Mary," Jim said, his face showing his discomfort. He couldn't hide his reaction, feeling both embarrassed and submissive. On Friday, Mary prepared for the day with anticipation. She made a simple chicken stir-fry and wondered if she'd even end up eating it, given her excitement. Jim helped her get ready. She chose a simple dress and heels, applying a light perfume. Before she left, she gave Jim a brief kiss on the cheek and walked out, her mind already on the evening ahead. Mary arrived at Josh's apartment at 6 o'clock, ready for whatever the night would bring. Josh welcomed her at the door, and the two shared a close moment, their connection clear. They spent the evening together, enjoying each other's company and sharing a meal. As the night went on, Mary felt overwhelmed by her emotions. She hadn't expected to feel this way, but there was something powerful about the experience. Later, they relaxed and talked, enjoying the quiet moment after everything that had happened. The bond between them felt strong, though Mary couldn't shake the feeling that things were more complicated now. Afterward, she got up and cooked the stir-fry, serving it to Josh. They ate in comfortable silence, exchanging glances that carried more meaning than words. "Mary, tonight was incredible," Josh said with a smile. "It was for me too," Mary replied, feeling both satisfied and reflective. As the evening came to a close, they shared one last intimate moment before falling asleep, exhausted but content. Josh woke her up and they shared a moment together. After that, he got up, took a shower, and said, "I'm making breakfast. You should shower too." He prepared eggs, sausage, and toast. Mary felt very hungry. She was still not dressed, while Josh wore gym shorts. Mary said, "I need to go home soon, Josh. It has been great." He picked her up and carried her back to the bed for some more time together, and they both felt very content. Mary got up, put on her dress, and found her shoes. She gave Josh a kiss as he lay in bed, saying, "Thanks." Then she left. On her way home, Mary felt anxious. She wondered what would happen now. The feeling of freedom she had might not last long since she was facing the reality of her choices. Talking about being open is one thing, but actually doing it is another. Jim had a tough night. He realized his own weaknesses had opened the door for Mary and Josh, but he also felt she had been careless. The more he thought about it, the more troubled he became. So what if he had a quiet side? Why did she choose to be with someone like Josh? He barely slept. He got up, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, packed a bag, and took some money from the safe. He paced the floor before getting into his truck and driving away. He had no plan, only feelings of heartbreak. Josh drove west all day, not stopping until he needed gas. He grabbed some coffee and a snack and kept going. He found himself in a small town off the interstate in Iowa as night fell. Without a phone, he bought one and called his workplace to let them know he would be away for a while. His longtime assistant, Eileen, would run things in his absence. He rented a room at a roadside inn. The staff took his card, and he didn't worry about Mary finding him. She had no way to reach him. Mary got home by late morning and immediately noticed Jim's truck was missing. It was Saturday, so he sometimes played golf, but she started to feel uneasy. When she tried to call his phone and it rang in the living room, her heart sank. She realized Jim had likely left. Overwhelmed, Mary sat down and cried for about an hour until she felt spent. Afterward, she took a shower. She wanted to feel fresh and avoid any reminders of what had happened. She tossed her dress away and cleaned herself thoroughly. Then she lay on the bed, finding it hard to sleep peacefully. Eventually, she decided to call Jim's mother, Edith, in Maryland. But Edith hadn't heard from Jim. Her husband had passed away 2 years earlier. Edith asked Mary why she didn't know where Jim was. "Edith, I made a mistake, and I think Jim has left me. But it will probably be okay. Please don't worry too much," Edith responded. "Oh, Mary, after all this time, what happened? Did another man get involved?" "Yes, but it's complicated. I'm really sorry, Edith. Things got a bit messy." She hung up the phone. "Oh, what a fool I am," she said to herself. "This is a real problem." She reached out to a few others, but was careful about what she said. If Jim came back, she didn't want to make him feel awkward, but no one knew where he could be. Feeling helpless, she decided to keep an eye on her email and phone. She sat in the living room, watching golf on TV without really paying attention. She noticed she had nothing to eat. The news came on and then went off. A PBS documentary started and then another. Still no news. At 10 o'clock, she went to bed but slept poorly. The next morning, Sunday, Mary looked for ways to pass the time. She tried to get some work done, but it didn't help. At noon, Josh called. She answered and thought she needed to make it clear that he should not reach out to her again. "Can you talk?" he asked. "Yes, Josh. My husband is gone and may not return." "I thought you said he was okay with it." "I thought he was, but I was very wrong. This will be our last conversation." "No, Mary. We were really good on Friday." "Yes, we were, but it doesn't matter now. I feel like I've lost everything." She started to cry. "I'll come and comfort you. Please don't cry." "You will not. You can't be with me anymore. You were a mistake. Please don't call me again." She hung up, but he called right back. She answered and yelled, "What part of never again don't you understand?" Then she hung up once more. She went upstairs feeling very upset. Meanwhile, Jim left Iowa and traveled down the Mississippi River. He reached Memphis and rented a room at a motel outside the city. It was 6 o'clock when he had dinner at a diner. He set up his computer and emailed his children and mother, sharing that he and Mary were separating due to mistakes on both sides. He kept it simple, stating that they were parting ways. Checking his inbox, he found an email from Mary. It read, "Jim, I love you. I made a huge mistake. Much of it is my fault, but part of it is also on him and a bit on you. I never thought you would react this way. If I had known, I would have acted differently. I have cut off all contact with him. If you decide to come back, I promise I won't look at another guy again. Very few people know what happened between us. I understand we can't go back to what we had, but we can build something new, which is better than nothing. I would have nothing without you. Love, Mary." Jim thought over her message for a while. He decided it would be too hasty to respond immediately since he was still very angry, both with her and himself. One thing he did decide was to email Harry Weiss. He knew that Josh had been let go, but he figured Harry would take action if he learned what had occurred. So he explained the situation, highlighting his agreement to the process. He concluded by hoping that something could be done about Josh and his behavior. He received a short reply about an hour later. "He's done for." Harry spread the word about Josh. Josh was still around, looking for work and using up his small savings. He hoped for a good job in San Diego and another one in D.C., but suddenly both companies stopped responding. There were no other options. Josh figured it was Harry Weiss's doing, probably due to Mary's husband, who he thought was not very strong. Unfortunately, Josh felt stuck and out of luck when it came to a law job with a good firm. There were other ways to earn a living, but he would need to move and start over. Josh also decided he needed to confront Jim Harris if he could find him. He suspected Jim had told Harry Weiss about him and Mary. This angered Josh, and he knew he had to act. He reached out to a friend from school who worked with the Chicago police asking for help in finding Jim. He promised that his friend wouldn't get into trouble. Jim was visiting Graceland, enjoying the place for Paul Simon rather than Elvis. He liked the Cadillacs, listened to some jazz, and enjoyed some barbecue. He bought a six-pack to take back to his room, but found no comfort in the drinks, so he put them away. He thought about Mary and her offer. Now he needed to think clearly about his feelings toward her. As he drove down to New Orleans, he reflected on his emotions. He explored the city, which was partly rebuilt. He liked the Garden District, but found the rest too chaotic, filled with people who were drunk and food that was too expensive. He then drove to Galveston, where he found a place he truly liked and stayed for 4 days, exploring. He almost rented a room for a month, but decided against it and continued to head west on Route 10. He enjoyed the Southwest, but eventually arrived in San Diego, not too far from home. It was costly, but it had a baseball team and pretty mountains. The traffic could be a hassle, but it wasn't always bad. He rented a small cabin north of the city, near the mountains, still relying on his credit card, Dot. When Mary got the bill, she noticed the different places he had visited, the last being Galveston. Jim checked his credit card online. He realized Mary would find out where he was soon if he didn't take action. He took out cash and opened a new account at a small bank. He was given a card, and although it listed him as J. Harris, it was the best he could do. Jim spent his time hiking in the area. He went to 2 baseball games, visited the Palomar Observatory, and reflected on his life. He reached a sort of decision. He contacted his lawyer and Eileen. He decided to sell his business, but made it clear that Eileen would stay on for 2 years. Soon after, Eileen called him. She offered to buy the business if he would let her pay half the cost later with some interest. After looking at the numbers, he agreed. He told his lawyer, and in just 2 weeks, Eileen's new company owned the business. At the same time, Mary had not heard from Jim in 2 months. She went back to work and was feeling good about her performance. She and Harry talked, and she knew he was happy with her work. She was earning enough money and could pay all her bills. But she missed Jim. Mary was starting to feel down about her marriage. Jim hadn't replied to her email, and their children had no idea where he was. When the card statement came in for the 2nd month, she noticed some charges from San Diego, but then nothing after that. She hired a private investigator to find Jim. She thought that if she could confront him in person, maybe he would come back. It was actually Josh who found Jim through a contact in Chicago. They tracked down Jim's bank account and his address. After thinking about it, Josh decided to go to San Diego. He felt that Jim had messed up his career and he needed to face him. Jim was staying in a cabin when the owner offered to sell it. The cabin had 5 rooms and was located on 12 acres. Jim had money from selling his business and an income from the loan, so he bought the cabin. He did this because he felt he could never go back home. He liked the area and the peaceful surroundings. Jim realized that buying the cabin might let Mary find out where he was if she looked for him. But he had made up his mind. He could never go back to their marriage. This thought became clearer for him as he reflected on what happened with Mary and Josh. From a distance, he could see how Mary took advantage of a weakness he had to get what she wanted. He felt he had allowed it to happen. He considered himself weak, but he also saw Mary as someone who had been very cunning in her actions. Mary's email had said she wouldn't have acted the way she did if she knew how he would feel. Jim wasn't so sure about that. He believed she loved him, but in the end, she chose her own happiness over their relationship, even knowing he was uncomfortable about her relationship with Josh. Mary eventually found out where Jim was through her investigator. When she learned he had sold his business, she felt shocked. Although she had never been part of it, the sale seemed like a big step away from the life he used to have. Josh had moved on, taking a significant step by buying a place in California. Mary decided to visit him, hoping for a chance to reconcile. She booked her flight and informed Harry of her plans, leaving Dulles Airport the next day. Meanwhile, Josh also left from Dulles that same day. He had his plans in place and took an earlier flight to San Diego. Once there, he rented a car and drove towards Jim's cabin. On the way, he stopped at a hardware store to buy a tire iron and a folding knife. He was determined to confront Jim. Josh had served in the Marines and felt confident in his ability to handle himself. He intended to catch Jim off guard. Mary rented a car as well and planned to reach Jim's cabin around 3 in the afternoon. She knew Jim usually spent his afternoons there. Before arriving, Josh had examined Jim's property using Google Earth. He noticed a small dirt road that led above the cabin. He drove along that road slowly, creating a little dust as he went. Jim had a daily routine at the cabin. He would run or hike in the morning, catch up on the news, eat lunch, and then work outdoors in the afternoons. He split firewood for the winter and repaired fences while also restoring an old barn. Jim had been keeping himself fit and was pleased with the progress he was making. Each evening, he would work out on a fitness course he had set up. This included climbing a wall, navigating through tires, swinging across a small area, and hitting a heavy bag in the barn. He dedicated time to these exercises 3 times a week. Jim's neighbors were spaced out, living about a mile away. He had met both families, had dinner with them, and enjoyed their company but appreciated the distance. As Josh approached Jim's property from a spot about 100 yards away, no one noticed him. He planned to enter through a line of trees, needing to cross an open space to reach the barn, although there was some cover halfway. Dressed in sweatpants and a lightweight hoodie with a mask on, Josh was prepared. The knife was secured at his side, and he carried the tire iron as he used binoculars to survey the area. He saw no movement, but heard some noise coming from the barn. Perfect. Josh ran to the back of the barn and stopped. He quietly moved to the front, where he noticed a door was slightly open. The noise continued inside, along with some frustrated words. Josh thought there had been an accident. He heard footsteps coming toward the door. He pressed himself against the wall next to the door and waited, holding a tire iron ready to swing. He decided he wouldn't hold back. He was going to hit Jim hard and find out what would happen. Jim was in the barn working on a piece of wood he had found. He was using an axe to shape it. However, when he swung to cut a knot from the wood, he missed a bit and it split. "Ugh," he complained, frustrated with himself and the wood. He decided he needed a tool to fix the split, so he put down the axe and went to get it from his house. Mary arrived at Jim's place around the same time. She drove up the road and parked in front of the house. She knocked on the door but got no answer. Hearing some noise from behind the house, she headed that way and recognized Jim's frustrated voice. It was a sound she was familiar with. As she walked around to the back of the house, she noticed someone in dark clothes, holding something about to strike Jim, who was coming out of the barn. Jim heard a loud scream from near his house. "Watch out, Jim!" Jim turned just in time to see the tire iron coming toward him. He ducked. Josh was startled by the scream, but there was no time to stop. He aimed to hit Jim hard, but Jim ducked and Josh ended up hitting him on the shoulder instead. Jim spun around and fell to the ground. He quickly got back on his feet, wanting to get away from his attacker. Now, Josh was determined to catch Jim and whoever had screamed. He saw Jim escaping and ran after him, swinging the tire iron. But Jim, even though hurt, was fast. He pretended to go toward the house, but when Josh followed, Jim dashed into the barn. Mary's scream had warned Jim. She started running toward the two men but saw Jim get hit. Then she saw him rush into the barn with Josh right behind him, swinging his weapon. Josh entered the dark barn and swung the tire iron several times, connecting with Jim once. He kept swinging hard. Jim reached the wood just before he was hit again, grazing his same arm. He rolled over the wood, resting on two sawhorses, and grabbed his axe. As Josh climbed over the wood, Jim swung the axe. The axe hit Josh in the leg. Josh yelled when he felt the pain. He had never experienced anything like it, but he was too far along to turn back now. He was determined to confront this guy. Josh rolled away from Jim and the axe. He had lost his makeshift weapon. He took out a knife and started to back away from the barn, hoping to defend himself at the doorway. His leg hurt badly, and there was a lot of blood. He paused just outside, moving to the right. Jim felt connected to some part of Josh, but wasn't sure how badly he had hurt him. He was certain of one thing. He wanted to finish this. He moved forward slowly as he watched Josh limp out of the doorway. Jim kicked the doorframe, causing it to shake. Josh reacted to the noise and lunged around the corner, aiming his knife at Jim. Jim struck Josh with the flat side of the axe, hitting him on the head. Josh staggered away from the barn and collapsed, unconscious. Jim ran outside. He found Josh on the ground. He looked closer and was shocked to see Mary. He hurried to Josh, pulling off the hoodie and mask. It was Josh. Jim stepped back from Mary, startled. "Did you bring him here?" Mary replied, "No," I screamed. "I can't believe he did this. My God, Jim, you can't think I would agree to this." Jim asked, "Was there a car here when you came?" "Your truck. No other car." Jim checked Josh's pulse. It was faint, but still there. Mary asked, "Is he dead?" Jim responded, "Not yet. He's losing a lot of blood. It might take a while before help arrives." Jim didn't reach for his phone. Mary looked at him, worrying. Will you help him?" Jim smiled softly but said, "I can't do much. I'm no doctor. Are you?" Mary took out her cell phone and dialed 911. After a brief moment, she said, "I have an emergency. A man attacked my husband and they're both hurt. I need an ambulance and the police." She paused, looking at Jim. "Where are we?" He gave her the address and she relayed it to the dispatcher. It took 22 minutes for help to arrive. By then, Jim was in pain from his shoulder injury, and Josh was unresponsive, likely from blood loss. An ambulance showed up, followed shortly by a police vehicle. During those 22 minutes, Jim and Mary watched as Josh lay there. Mary was crying, trying to stop the bleeding from a wound, while Jim remained quiet and still. When Josh took his last breath, Mary looked hard at Jim, blood from Josh smearing her arms and shirt. Jim said, "This is my home. He came in and attacked me for no reason. That's the truth." Mary replied, "You could have done something. You could have tried, Jim." Jim answered, "I couldn't have done more than you. Maybe kept him here a little longer. I didn't owe him anything. Actually, that's not accurate. I owed him what I did." Mary walked to the front of the house. Soon, when he heard the sirens, Jim followed her. The paramedics checked on Josh and left him where he lay. They assessed Jim's shoulder, finding a large bruise on him. They told him he probably didn't have any broken bones. He refused more treatment and said he would see a doctor later. They gave him some strong ibuprofen. The police took him away from Mary. They had many questions. The first one was where Josh had come from. Jim guessed he had come down from the dirt road up the hill. An officer found the rental car there. Jim told the police the whole story, including the issues in his marriage. He did not mention his willingness to forgive. He shared what he knew about the attack, and everything he said matched what Mary reported. He was taken to a police station far away and gave a formal statement. Afterward, they offered him a ride home. He asked about Mary. She had been released earlier. Jim left the station and they drove him home. When he arrived, he saw Mary's rental car parked by the porch. She was sitting there with her feet on his table. He went over and sat down next to her. "Why are you still here?" "I came to talk. I still need to talk. I'm so sorry for all of this, Mary. I got your email, but it won't work for us now." "Oh, Jim. It was only one night. Just one night out of more than 20 years. Why can't we move past it?" "Because you took advantage of me. You used my weakness. And honestly, I think you could do it again. I couldn't control you if you didn't want to. Can't you resist me if I tried?" "I might hurt you, Mary." She looked pale and turned away for a moment. Then she looked back. "I would take that chance, Jim." "I wouldn't take that chance, Mary. It's over. I have some good feelings for you, but I also have anger and regret. Seeing you just reminds me of that. I don't think that will ever change. So, I have to leave?" "Yeah. I know it's late, but I can find you a room at a motel down the road. I don't feel comfortable with you staying here." So that's what they did. She came for breakfast at his invitation, and they talked about the details of their separation. Mary left and flew back to D.C. that afternoon. The divorce went smoothly. After that, Jim started a new business in San Diego County, similar to his old one. It was successful, but he didn't worry too much about it. He focused on improving the property. Eventually, he started dating a woman named Ethel Merton who moved in with him. They got along well in most ways. Jim never hinted at his more vulnerable side. He knew it still existed, but kept it hidden. Ethel was his age and also divorced. She was cheerful and friendly, which sometimes annoyed Jim, but she was wonderful to be with. Mary worked at her law firm for 10 more years before retiring. She had some connections and she had a couple of casual relationships, but she never found another Jim, although there were a few men similar to Josh. In her late 50s, she enjoyed traveling on cruise ships. She enjoyed her way of living and the places she visited. Loneliness often stayed by her side. Jim and Mary met during holidays when the family got together. They were friendly but kept some distance. The only time they truly connected was when they played with their grandchildren. In those moments, they shared laughter and joy. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.